Hi, Latin School friends. Thanks for joining me today for library. So, we're going to talk about fairy tales today. Fairy tales are different from other kinds of stories. Do you know what makes them special and different than other kinds of stories? So, fairy tales are make believe, and they usually take place a long time ago in a faraway place. They often start with once upon a time. So many of the stories that we read, the fairy tales we read, start with once upon a time and often end with, and they lived happily ever after. So, they usually also have a happy ending. Um, they're also usually there's some kind of magic in them or something kind of mystical or magical. So it might be dragons or witches or fairies or some other kind of magic. Um, there's usually a problem that the characters have to solve. So there's lots of different fairy tales that you've probably heard before. For example, some of my favorites are Hansel and Gretel, The Three Little Pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, and the one we're going to read today, which is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Something else about fairy tales is that because they're usually very old, they get told over and over again, and sometimes that makes the story change a little bit over time. So, we're going to read actually two different versions of the same story. So, the first one is Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and this one is the same story but told in a little bit of a different way. It's Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs, and we're going to talk about what's the same and what's different between both of these books. So, let's get started. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, retold and illustrated by James Marshall. Once there was a little girl called Goldilocks. "What a sweet child," said someone new in town. "That's what you think," said a neighbor. One morning, Goldilocks' mother sent her to buy muffins in the next village. "You must promise not to take the shortcut through the forest," she said. "I've heard that bears live there." "I promise," said Goldilocks. But to tell the truth, Goldilocks was one of those naughty little girls who do exactly as they please. Meanwhile, in a clearing deeper inside the forest, in a charming house all their own, a family of brown bears was sitting down to breakfast. "Poof!" cried big old Papa Bear. "This porridge is scalding. I've burned my tongue. I'm dying," cried Baby Bear. "Now, really," said Mama Bear, "that's quite enough." "I know," said Papa Bear. "Why don't we go for a spin while the porridge is cooling?" "Excellent," said Mama Bear. So they got on their rusty old bicycle and off they went. A few minutes later, Goldilocks arrived at the bear's house. She walked right in without even knocking. On the dining room table were three inviting bowls of porridge. "I don't mind if I do," said Goldilocks, helping herself to the biggest bowl. But the porridge in the biggest bowl was much too hot. "Poof!" said Goldilocks, and she spit it out. Next, she tasted the porridge in the medium sized bowl, but that porridge was much too cold. Then Goldilocks tasted the porridge in the little bowl, and it was just right. Neither too hot nor too cold. In fact, she liked it so much that she gobbled it all up. Feeling full and satisfied, Goldilocks thought it would be great fun to have a look around. Right away, she noticed a lot of coarse brown fur everywhere. "They must have kitties," she said. In the parlor, there were three chairs. "I don't mind if I do," she said, climbing into the biggest one. But the biggest chair was much too hard, and she just couldn't get comfortable. Next, she sat in the medium sized chair, but that chair was much too soft, and she thought she might never get out of it. Then Goldilocks sat in the little chair, and that was just right. Neither too hard nor too soft. In fact, she liked it so much that she rocked and rocked until the chair fell completely to pieces. Now, all that rocking left Goldilocks quite tuckered out. I could take a little snooze, she said, so she went to look for a comfy place to nap. Upstairs were 3 beds. I don't mind if I do, said Goldilocks, and she got into the biggest one. But the head of the biggest bed was much too high. Next, she tried the medium-sized bed, but the head of that bed was much too low. Then Goldilocks tried the little bed, and it was just right. Soon she was all nice and cozy and sound asleep. She did not hear the bears come home. The 3 bears were mighty hungry, but when they went in for breakfast, they could scarcely believe their eyes. Somebody has been in my porridge, said Papa Bear. Somebody's been in my porridge, said Mama Bear. Somebody's been in my porridge, said Baby Bear, and eaten it all up. In the parlor, the 3 bears were in for another little surprise. Somebody's been sitting in my chair, said Papa Bear. Somebody's been sitting in my chair, said Mama Bear. Well, somebody's been sitting in my chair, said Baby Bear, and broken it to smithereens. The 3 bears went upstairs on tiptoe, not knowing what they would discover. At first, everything seemed fine, but then Papa Bear lay down on his big brass bed. Somebody's been lying in my bed, he cried, and he was not amused. Eek, cried Mama Bear, somebody's been lying in my bed. Look, cried Baby Bear, somebody's been lying in my bed, and she's still here. Now, see here, roared Papa Bear. Goldilocks woke up with a start, and her eyes nearly popped out of her head. But before the bears could demand a proper explanation, Goldilocks was out of bed, out the window, and on her way home. Who was that little girl? Asked Baby Bear. I have no idea, said Mama Bear, but I hope we never see her again. And they never did. The end. So now we're going to read Goldilocks and the 3 Dinosaurs and think about the differences between these 2 stories. This is by Mo Willems. Once upon a time, there were 3 dinosaurs. Papa Dinosaur, Mama Dinosaur, and some other dinosaur who happened to be visiting from Norway. One day, for no particular reason, the 3 dinosaurs made up their beds, positioned their chairs just so, and cooked 3 bowls of delicious chocolate pudding at varying temperatures. Oh boy, said Papa Dinosaur in his loud, booming voice. It is finally time to leave and go to someplace else. Yes, continued Mama Dinosaur. I sure hope no innocent little succulent child happens by our unlocked home while we are someplace else. Then the other dinosaur made a loud noise that sounded like a big evil laugh, but was probably just a polite Norwegian expression. The 3 dinosaurs went someplace else, and were definitely not hiding in the woods waiting for an unsuspecting kid to come by. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, a poorly supervised little girl named Goldilocks came traipsing along. Just then, the forest boomed with what could have been a dinosaur yelling, Gotcha! But I'm pretty sure it was just the wind. The loud noise was immediately followed by another loud noise that sounded kind of like, "Be patient, Papa Dinosaur. The trap is not yet sprung." But that could have been a rock falling or a squirrel. Hmm. Either way, Goldilocks was not the type of little girl who listened to anyone or anything. For example, Goldilocks never listened to warnings about the dangers of barging into strange, enormous houses. So, as soon as Goldilocks came across a strange, enormous house, she barged right in. Inside, Goldilocks immediately smelled the 3 bowls of delicious chocolate pudding. Mmm, said Goldilocks. That chocolate pudding smells delicious. If only I could get all the way up to the top of that counter. Then Goldilocks noticed a very tall ladder that just happened to be there and certainly wasn't left on purpose. Goldilocks climbed up the ladder and found herself face to face with 3 gigantic bowls of chocolate pudding. The first bowl of pudding was too hot, but Goldilocks ate it all anyway because, hey, it's chocolate pudding, right? The second bowl of chocolate pudding was too cold, but who cares about temperatures when you've got a big bowl of chocolate pudding, right? Not her. The third bowl of chocolate pudding was just right, but Goldilocks was on such a roll, she hardly noticed. Soon Goldilocks was stuffed like one of those delicious chocolate-filled little girl bonbons, which, by the way, are totally not the favorite thing in the whole world for hungry dinosaurs. Wink, wink. Tired and groggy, Goldilocks noticed the 3 chairs in the living room. So she climbed down the ladder and walked out of the kitchen. The first chair was too tall. The second chair was too tall. But the third chair was still too tall. Goldilocks wasn't going to climb that high just to sit in some chair, so she hiked over to the bedroom. When she got there, Goldilocks noticed that the beds were also gigantically big. "What is going on here?" groaned the exhausted girl. "The bears that live here must be nuts." Just then, the room filled with a loud, booming noise that was either a passing truck or a dinosaur gloating. "A few more minutes and she'll be asleep. Delicious chocolate-filled little girl bonbons are yummier when they're rested." Even a little girl who never listened to anyone or anything had to hear that. Goldilocks took a minute to stop and think, which was longer than she was used to stopping and thinking. "Hey," she told herself, "this isn't some bear's house. This is some dinosaur's house." Say what you like about Goldilocks, but she was no fool. As quickly as she could, she ran to the back door and got out of there. Just then, a loud plane flew by, which sounded pretty much like a trio of dinosaurs yelling, "Now!" or "Charge!" or the Norwegian expression for chewy bonbon time. Suddenly and completely coincidentally, the 3 dinosaurs rushed through the front door. But they were too late. Goldilocks was gone, and all that was left in the house were 3 disappointed dinosaurs. The end. So there were a lot of things in the story that were the same as the first story we read, and a lot of things that were very different. Can you think of anything that was the same? So one of the first things I noticed was that Goldilocks was in both stories. And also, there were 3 other characters, 3 family members in both stories. The first one had 3 bears, the second one had 3 dinosaurs. And the order of what Goldilocks did was also the same. So she first ate some of their food in both stories. Next, she went and sat in their chairs, and then last she went and slept in their beds. And in both stories, she got away. So some things that were different in the first story, there were bears. In the second story, there were dinosaurs. Also, another difference is that the bears were eating chocolate, or the bears were eating porridge, and the dinosaurs were eating chocolate pudding. So that was something that was also different. And one more thing I noticed that was different is that the bears in Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the family had a mama bear, a papa bear, and a baby bear. But in Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs, there was a mama dinosaur, a papa dinosaur, and another person or another dinosaur visiting from Norway. So that was something that was different about their families. So I want you guys to now do this worksheet that I provided on the Weebly, and all you're going to do is color in the pictures and decide which one of these is the first thing that Goldilocks did, the second thing she did, and then the last thing she did in the story. So we're putting them in the right order of what she did in both stories. Okay? Hope everybody has a great week. Enjoy.